I'm Amanda, 28 female. I work as a freelance graphic designer from my small but cozy apartment, a life I built for myself with a lot of hard work and late nights fueled by coffee. It's a quiet life, but it's mine. For years, my world revolved around two things, my career and my family. I thought one was my passion and the other was my foundation, the unshakable bedrock of my entire existence. It turns out, even bedrock can crumble into dust, and the people you'd take a bullet for can be the ones to pull the trigger. This story is about how I discovered that my own sister, the golden child of our family, stole a precious heirloom from me, and how my parents, in their blinding favoritism, chose her lies over my truth. They threw me out of their lives, but they made one critical mistake. They underestimated me, and they had no idea that the beautiful vintage necklace contained a tiny, modern secret that would unravel everything. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. My grandmother, Rose, is the kind of woman who seems to be woven from sunlight and steel. At 80 years old, she still has a spark in her eye that could light up a dark room and a laugh that feels like coming home. She spent her life as a seamstress, her hands shaping beautiful garments from simple cloth, a magic I've always admired. Her stories are my favorite books, and her wisdom is my compass. On my 25th birthday, she called me into her quiet living room, the air thick with the scent of lavender and old wood. She pressed a velvet box into my hands. Inside, nestled on a bed of worn silk, was the most beautiful piece of jewelry I had ever seen. It was a vintage gold locket, intricately carved with forget-me-nots, hanging from a delicate, sturdy chain. "This was my mother's," Grandma Rose told me, her voice soft. "She received it from her mother. It's been passed down to the eldest daughter in our family for 4 generations, and now it's yours, Amanda." She explained that the tradition was about more than just passing on a piece of gold. It was about passing on the strength, resilience, and love of the women who came before. It was a symbol of our lineage, a tangible piece of our history. Holding it, I felt a profound connection to these women I'd never met. It was more than a necklace. It was an heirloom, a legacy. I promised her I would treasure it always, that I would wear it with pride and one day pass it on to my own daughter, should I be so lucky. This gift, however, subtly highlighted the invisible lines drawn in our family. I have a younger sister, Jessica. At 22, Jessica is the family's dazzling, unpredictable comet, while I've always been the steady, reliable North Star. She is beautiful, charming, and has a knack for making everyone feel like they are the most important person in the room, as long as it serves her. Our parents, Linda and Robert, orbit her like planets around the sun. My mother, a former salon owner, sees Jessica as a flawless reflection of her own youthful beauty and social grace. My father, a sales manager who values charm and persuasion above all else, thinks Jessica has the world at her feet. They have spent her entire life paving her way, cleaning up her messes, and funding her ever-changing whims. Her latest ambition was to become a social media influencer. A career that seemed to involve little more than taking glamorous photos, attending parties, and complaining about how expensive it was to maintain her image. My achievements, on the other hand, were met with polite but muted acknowledgement. Graduating with honors, building a successful freelance business from scratch, buying my own car, furnishing my own apartment, these were all things I was simply expected to do. I was the responsible one, the one who never asked for anything, the one who didn't cause drama. This role, I learned, comes with a heavy price. You become invisible. My successes were quiet, my struggles were my own, and my needs were often secondary to whatever crisis Jessica was currently manufacturing. When I first showed the family the necklace, the reactions were telling. My father nodded, saying, "That's nice, Amanda, very classic." My mother examined it with a critical eye. "It's a bit old-fashioned, isn't it, but lovely that Rose thought of you." Jessica, however, was mesmerized. "Oh my God, is that real gold?" She'd breathed, her eyes wide. "It must be worth a fortune." I gently corrected her, explaining that its value was sentimental, not monetary, but I could see the wheels turning in her head. To her, everything had a price tag. The secret I kept from all of them, even Grandma Rose, was about the tracker. A couple of years prior, my apartment had been broken into. The thieves didn't get much, mostly some electronics, but the violation of my space left me shaken. My most valuable possessions weren't the most expensive ones, but the ones with memories attached. I started thinking about protecting the things that truly mattered. I found a company that specialized in creating tiny GPS trackers, small enough to be embedded in jewelry by a professional. It wasn't cheap, but the peace of mind felt worth it. I took the necklace to a trusted jeweler who carefully concealed the device within the locket's clasp. It was my secret insurance policy. I never thought I'd need it to protect the necklace from someone inside my own family. It was a precaution against the faceless dangers of the world, not against the person who shared my childhood. That thought was so inconceivable it never once crossed my mind. The necklace was safe, I believed, as long as it was with the people I loved. The last normal family dinner we had was on a Sunday, 2 weeks before my world fell apart. I wore the necklace. It felt right, a subtle armor of heritage in the place I often felt most like an outsider. The dinner was, as usual, centered around Jessica. She had just returned from a weekend trip to a music festival, a trip my parents had funded, of course. She regaled us with stories of VIP tents and celebrity sightings, her phone screen flashing with perfectly curated photos. "The networking was insane," she said, flipping her hair. "But it's so expensive to keep up. My outfits, the tickets, the travel, my followers expect a certain lifestyle, you know?" She sighed dramatically, glancing at my father, who was already nodding in sympathy. My mother chimed in, "Well, you have to spend money to make money, sweetheart. It's an investment in your brand." I stayed quiet, stirring my pasta, the familiar feeling of frustration simmering just below the surface. My brand was built on 14-hour workdays and chasing invoices, not on sponsored posts and free products. Later, as I was helping my mom clear the table, Jessica came up behind me. "I'm obsessed with that necklace," she said, her fingers lightly brushing against the locket at my throat. "It's so vintage chic. You're so lucky Grandma Rose gave it to you." There was an edge to her voice, a covetous gleam in her eyes that I chose to ignore. "It's my most treasured possession," I said simply, moving away toward the kitchen. "You know," she continued, following me, "if you ever needed cash, you could probably get a lot for it. Just saying." I turned to face her, my expression firm. "It's not for sale, Jessica. It's never going to be for sale." She held up her hands in mock surrender. Okay, chill, it was just a thought." But her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. The conversation left a bitter taste in my mouth, a faint alarm bell ringing in the back of my mind. But I dismissed it. She was selfish and materialistic, yes, but she wasn't a thief. She was my sister. A week later, I was getting ready for a gallery opening. A client of mine was showcasing some work, and it was a big night for them. I wanted to look my best. I put on a simple black dress and went to my jewelry box to get the necklace. It was the perfect final touch. I opened the velvet-lined lid. My rings were there, my earrings, my other necklaces. But the spot where I always kept the locket, its own special compartment, was empty. My heart did a painful little flip-flop. "It's fine," I told myself. "You probably left it on the dresser, or in the bathroom." I began to search, a calm, methodical search at first. I checked my nightstand, my dresser drawers, the small dish on my bathroom counter where I sometimes left my rings. Nothing. The calm began to fray at the edges, replaced by a thread of panic. I started searching more frantically, pulling out drawers, looking under the bed, checking the pockets of the jacket I'd worn last. The hollow space in my jewelry box began to mirror a hollow, sick feeling growing in my stomach. I sat on the edge of my bed, my breath coming in short, sharp bursts. I forced myself to think logically. When was the last time I saw it? The family dinner. I distinctly remember taking it off when I got home and placing it in its box. I hadn't worn it since. Who had been in my apartment since then? The answer was a list of one: Jessica. She had stopped by 2 days ago, using the spare key I'd foolishly given her for emergencies. She claimed she needed to borrow a specific shade of lipstick for a photo shoot. She was only there for 10 minutes. I was on a work call in my home office and had just waved her in the direction of the bathroom. She could have easily slipped into my bedroom. The thought was so ugly, so vile that my mind recoiled from it. No, it couldn't be. I was jumping to conclusions. There had to be another explanation. I must have misplaced it. I spent the next hour tearing my apartment apart. I emptied every drawer, checked every bag, sifted through every pocket. I looked in the most illogical place. The refrigerator, the kitchen cabinets, the linen closet, fueled by a desperate hope that a simple, embarrassing mistake was the answer. But with every empty space I checked, the sick certainty grew. The necklace wasn't lost. It was gone. And the only person who had the opportunity and the motive, the only person who had looked at it with dollar signs in her eyes, was my sister. The realization didn't crash down on me like a wave. It seeped in like a slow, cold poison, paralyzing me from the inside out. My sister had stolen from me. She had taken the one thing she knew meant the world to me, a piece of our family's history, and she had done it without a flicker of remorse. The hollow space in my jewelry box was now a gaping wound in my heart. For a full day, I was paralyzed by a toxic mix of grief and disbelief. I kept replaying Jessica's visit in my mind. Her casual, breezy entrance. Her quick trip to the bathroom. The way she'd called out a cheerful "bye, love you" on her way out. It was all a performance. The thought of her hand closing around that locket, my locket, while I was just one room away, made me physically ill. I knew I couldn't let it go. This wasn't about a borrowed sweater or a few dollars taken from a wallet. This was a profound betrayal, a desecration of something sacred. I needed to confront her. I needed to confront all of them. I decided to go to my parents' house. It felt like neutral territory, though I knew deep down it was anything but. I called ahead and asked if I could come over to talk about something important. My mother's cheerful tone on the phone was like a knife twisting in my gut. When I arrived, they were all in the living room, Mom, Dad, and Jessica, looking like a perfect family portrait. Jessica was on the couch, scrolling through her phone, a picture of innocence. "Amanda, honey, you look exhausted," my mom said, her brow furrowing with what I once would have mistaken for genuine concern. "Is everything okay with work?" "It's not about work," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. I remained standing, needing the physical advantage. "I came to talk about Grandma Rose's necklace." 3 pairs of eyes turned to me. Jessica's phone stopped moving. "It's gone," I said, looking directly at my sister. "It was stolen from my apartment." My dad frowned. "Stolen? Did you call the police? Was anything else taken?" "No, nothing else was taken," I replied, my gaze unwavering from Jessica. "The only person who has been in my apartment since I last wore it was Jessica." The air in the room instantly became thick and heavy. Jessica's face, which had been a mask of casual indifference, crumpled into a caricature of shock and hurt. "What are you talking about?" she gasped, her eyes welling up with practiced tears. Are you accusing me of stealing from you?" "I'm not accusing," I said, my voice cold and flat. "I'm stating a fact. You were the only one there, you commented on how much it was worth, and now it's gone." Before I could say another word, my mother was on her feet, rushing to Jessica's side and wrapping a protective arm around her. "Amanda, that is a monstrous thing to say to your sister. How could you even think that?" "Because it's the only explanation that makes sense," I shot back, my composure finally cracking. She needed money for her ridiculous influencer lifestyle. She was obsessed with the necklace. "Enough," my father's voice boomed, cutting me off. He stood up, his face red with anger. "I will not have you come into this house and attack your sister with these wild, jealous accusations. Jessica would never do something like that." Jealous? The word hit me like a physical blow. That was their go-to explanation for any conflict between us. I wasn't hurt, I was jealous. I wasn't right, I was jealous. My legitimate feelings were always dismissed as a character flaw. "This isn't about jealousy," I cried, my voice choked with a sudden surge of tears I couldn't hold back. "This is about my property, an heirloom. something that is supposed to represent the women in our family. Jessica was now sobbing into my mother's shoulder, a full-blown melodrama in progress. "I can't believe you hate me this much, Amanda," she wept. "I looked up to you. I loved you." It was a masterful performance, and our parents were the captivated audience. They looked from her trembling form to my tear-streaked, angry face, and they made their choice. They had been making it for 22 years. "I think you need to apologize, Amanda," my father said, his voice dangerously low. "You have deeply hurt your sister, and frankly, you have embarrassed yourself." I stared at him, dumbfounded. Apologize? I was the victim here. I had been violated, betrayed by my own flesh and blood, and he wanted me to apologize. "No," I whispered, the word feeling foreign and powerful on my tongue. "I will not apologize for telling the truth." "Then you can leave," my mother said, her voice dripping with ice. She hadn't even turned to look at me, her entire focus on comforting the liar in her arms. "I won't have this kind of poison in my house. You can come back when you're ready to be a decent human being and say you're sorry to the sister you've just slandered." Her words hung in the air, sharp and glittering with cruelty. It wasn't just a dismissal, it was an exile. They weren't just taking her side, they were erasing mine. They looked at the two of us, the thief and the victim, and they chose the thief because her version of reality was prettier, easier, and more aligned with the family myth they had so carefully constructed. In that moment, the foundation I thought was my bedrock cracked wide open, revealing nothing but a hollow, empty space beneath. I looked at their faces, my father's rigid anger, my mother's cold disdain, my sister's triumphant, tear-stained smirk, and I knew I had not just lost a necklace. I had lost my family. Without another word, I turned and walked out the door, the sound of it closing behind me echoing like a final judgment. The drive away from my parents' house was a blur of tears and suffocating pain. The familiar streets of my hometown seemed alien, the houses and trees distorted through the watery film over my eyes. I was driving aimlessly, with no destination in mind, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. My mind was a chaotic storm of their words: monstrous, jealous, a decent human being, slandered. Each word was a fresh stab of betrayal. They didn't even hesitate. There was no moment of consideration, no "let's talk this through," no benefit of the doubt for the daughter who had never given them a moment's trouble. Their loyalty was a one-way street, flowing directly to Jessica, washing away everything else in its path. The grief was overwhelming, a physical weight pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. I felt like a child again, lost and utterly alone. I had to pull over. I swerved into the parking lot of a deserted park, killed the engine, and finally let go. I buried my face in my hands and sobbed. Not quiet, dignified tears, but ugly, gut-wrenching sobs that tore through my body. I wept for the loss of the necklace, for the piece of my history that was now gone. I wept for the loss of my sister, the girl I grew up with, who was now a stranger and a thief. But most of all, I wept for the loss of my parents, for the shattering of the illusion that their love was unconditional. The family I thought didn't exist. It was a carefully crafted fiction, and I had just been brutally edited out of the story. I sat there for what felt like hours, the car growing cold as the sun began to set. My emotional storm finally subsided, leaving behind a desolate, empty calm. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat, a text from my mother. "Your father and I are deeply disappointed in you. Don't contact us until you are ready to make things right with your sister." I stared at the message, a fresh wave of cold fury washing away the last remnants of my sorrow. Make things right? They had it all backward. And then, like a tiny flicker of light in an endless cavern of darkness, a memory surfaced: the tracker. In the emotional chaos of the discovery and the confrontation, I had completely forgotten about it. The secret insurance policy. My hands were shaking as I picked up my phone, my fingers fumbling as I swiped through the apps. I found the one I was looking for, a discreet gray icon labeled Assets. I tapped it, my heart pounding against my ribs. The app opened to a map. For a second there was nothing. My stomach dropped. Had she found it and destroyed it? Was the battery dead? Then a tiny blue dot appeared. It pinged. It was active. I zoomed in on the location, my breath catching in my throat. The blue dot wasn't at Jessica's apartment. It wasn't at our parents' house or the home of one of her friends. It was pulsing steadily over a small, nondescript building on a commercial street downtown. I zoomed in further, reading the label that popped up on the map. Downtown Pawn and Loan. Pawn shop. The words burned on the screen. The cold fury inside me solidified, hardening from a liquid rage into something solid and sharp, like a shard of ice in my chest. This was it, the absolute, undeniable technological proof. Jessica hadn't just borrowed it. She hadn't lost it. She hadn't even hidden it away to sell later. She had hawked it. She had taken our great-grandmother's legacy, a symbol of our family's strength and history, and traded it for cash as quickly as she could. The sentimental value I had cherished meant nothing to her. She had looked at a priceless heirloom and seen nothing but a quick payday for her next sponsored post or festival ticket. The grief was gone, burned away by a white-hot certainty. The sorrow was replaced by a chilling, crystal-clear resolve. My parents had chosen their side set on lies and theatrics. They had called me a monster, a liar jealous. They had exiled me from the family for daring to speak the truth. Well, I had the truth now. It was a little blue dot on a map, a digital whisper of betrayal that was about to become a deafening roar. I put the car in drive, my movements precise and controlled. I was no longer a sobbing victim driving aimlessly into the sunset. I was a woman with a destination. I wasn't just going to get my necklace back. I was going to get justice. And I was going to make sure that the people who had so easily thrown me away were there to witness every single moment of it. The game had changed. They thought they had ended the story, but they had no idea I was the one holding the pen for the final chapter. I didn't drive to the pawn shop. Not yet. The rage humming through my veins was a powerful engine, but I knew that acting on raw emotion would be a mistake. Jessica had used tears and drama to win. I would use logic, evidence, and control. As a graphic designer, my job is to take a chaotic jumble of ideas and arrange them into a clear, compelling, and effective design. I decided to approach this situation the same way. This wouldn't be a messy, emotional confrontation. It would be a meticulously designed reveal of the truth. I drove home to my quiet, empty apartment. The mess from my frantic search was still there, drawers ajar, cushions tossed aside. I methodically began to clean, the simple act of restoring order to my physical space helping to restore order to my mind. As I worked, I planned. My first step was to create a digital file of evidence. I took a screenshot of the live GPS location, the blue dot hovering over the pawn shop, complete with the timestamp. I then went through my photo albums, both physical and digital, and found every picture I had of me wearing the necklace. I scanned the old photos and saved the digital ones, creating a clear photographic history of my ownership. I found the original, albeit informal, appraisal Grandma Rose had given me, which described the locket in detail, noting its unique carvings and slight imperfections. I scanned that too. Finally, I found a birthday card from my grandmother from the year she gave it to me, where she had written, "May this locket always remind you of the strong women you come from. Wear it in health and happiness, my dear Amanda." I scanned the card. Each item became a layer in my design, a piece of irrefutable proof. My second step was to engage the authorities. Storming into the pawn shop alone was a bad idea. I needed the weight of the law on my side. The next morning, I walked into the local police precinct. I calmly and clearly filed a report for stolen property. I didn't mention my sister by name at first. I simply stated that a valuable and unique piece of jewelry had been stolen from my locked apartment, and I had reason to believe it was now at Downtown Pawn and Loan. I presented the officer with my folder of evidence, the photos, the appraisal, the description. Then, I showed him the live GPS data on my phone. The officer, a weary-looking man in his 50s named Sergeant Miller, raised an eyebrow. He'd probably seen his fair share of messy family disputes, but the digital tracking was a modern twist. "You have a tracker in it?" he asked, a hint of professional interest in his voice. "Yes," I said, "a precaution." He nodded, impressed. "Smart." He took my statement, gave me a case number, and assured me he would have an officer look into it. Pawn shops are legally required to hold items for a certain period and cooperate with police investigations into stolen goods, he explained. They also take a copy of the seller's ID and security photos. If your necklace is there, we'll find out who sold it. I knew who sold it, but I let the process play out. This was about building an airtight case, not just about my word against hers. My third step was to contact the pawn shop directly. I wasn't going to be aggressive. I just wanted to put them on notice. I called the shop and spoke to the manager. I calmly explained that an item matching the description of my stolen heirloom had been tracked to their location and that I had filed a police report with case number so-and-so. The manager's tone shifted from bored to alert. The last thing a business like that wants is to be caught dealing in stolen goods. He confirmed they would cooperate fully with the police and would check their inventory and security footage immediately. With the official wheels in motion, I moved on to the final, most crucial part of my plan, the audience. This couldn't happen in a vacuum. My parents' judgment had been passed behind the closed doors of their living room, where Jessica's fiction could thrive. The truth needed to be revealed in the light, in a place where facts couldn't be denied and crocodile tears held no currency. They needed to see the consequences of their daughter's actions and their own willful blindness, not just be told about them later. I waited until I received a call back from Sergeant Miller. He confirmed it all. The necklace was there. They had security footage of the transaction, and they had a copy of the seller's driver's license. The name on the ID was Jessica Miller. He asked if I wanted to press charges. Yes, I said without a moment of hesitation. Absolutely. He told me they would arrange to have officers meet me at the shop the next day at 11 a.m. to officially identify and reclaim my property, and they would be questioning my sister separately. This was my moment. I composed a text message. It was carefully worded, designed to be irresistible and non-threatening. I sent it as a group message to my father, my mother, and Jessica. Hi everyone, I have an update on the necklace. I've located it. The situation is a bit complicated, and I could really use my family's support to sort it out. Can you please meet me tomorrow at 11 a.m.? Here's the address. I pasted the address of Downtown Pawn and Loan. I knew they wouldn't be able to resist. My parents would assume I had found it somewhere, realized my mistake, and was now ready to eat humble pie. They would come to witness my apology. Jessica would come out of arrogant curiosity, or perhaps to make sure her story held up, confident that Mommy and Daddy would protect her. They would walk in expecting to see a remorseful daughter, ready to beg for forgiveness. Instead, they would be walking into the final, perfectly executed stage of the truth's design. The next morning, I woke up with a strange sense of calm. The anger and grief were still there, but they were now distant companions, sitting quietly in the back seat while a cold, clear-eyed resolve was in the driver's seat. I dressed carefully, not in anything flashy, but in an outfit that made me feel strong and composed. Dark jeans, a simple blouse, and a blazer. Armor. When I arrived at the pawn shop at 10:45, Sergeant Miller and another uniformed officer were already waiting for me in an unmarked car. "You ready for this, Ms. Miller?" Sergeant Miller asked, his expression professional but not unkind. "I am," I said, my voice steady. "All right, let's go inside first. We'll have you identify the item, and then we'll wait for your family to arrive. We'll be here with you the whole time." We walked inside. The shop was a cluttered cavern of other people's discarded dreams: guitars, electronics, old jewelry, and power tools. The manager, a man named Frank, was waiting behind the counter. He recognized me from my phone call and nodded grimly. He disappeared into a back room and returned a moment later with a small plastic bag. Inside it was my necklace. Seeing it again, so unceremoniously tagged and bagged, sent a sharp pang through my chest. Frank carefully opened the bag and laid the locket on a black velvet cloth on the counter. "Is this it?" Sergeant Miller asked. I picked it up. The familiar weight of it in my hand was both a comfort and a fresh wound. I ran my thumb over the carved forget-me-nots. "Yes," I said quietly, "this is it." I put the necklace back on the counter and took a step back, positioning myself near the officers, and we waited. At precisely 11 o'clock, the bell over the shop door chimed. My family walked in. My father led the way, his face set in a stern, expectant expression. My mother followed, her purse clutched in front of her like a shield, and behind them, smirking ever so slightly, was Jessica. She looked smug, confident, ready to graciously accept the apology she was sure was coming. Their expressions faltered as they took in the scene. Me, standing calm and dry-eyed, the two police officers, the pawn shop manager behind the counter. The confident smirks vanished, replaced by confusion and a flicker of apprehension. "Amanda, what is this?" my father demanded, his voice echoing in the quiet shop. "What's going on? Why are the police here?" "I told you I located the necklace," I said, my voice even and clear. "It's right here." I gestured to the locket sitting on the counter. My mother's eyes widened. "Oh, thank goodness, you found it. So, you see, you owe your sister a huge apology for what you accused her of." I held her gaze. "I didn't find it, Mom. It was sold to this shop 2 days ago, for $300. A heavy silence fell over the room. Jessica went pale. "Sold?" my father repeated, his brow furrowed. "By who? Was this from the break-in you had years ago?" He was grasping for any other explanation, any narrative that didn't involve the golden child standing beside him. "No, Dad," I said, turning my eyes to my sister, who was now actively avoiding my gaze, staring intently at a display of power drills. "The shop owner here, Frank, keeps very good records. Security footage of every transaction. A copy of the seller's government-issued ID. Isn't that right, Frank?" Frank, the manager, cleared his throat and nodded. "That's the law." Sergeant Miller stepped forward. He held up a printed screenshot from the security footage. It was a clear image of Jessica, standing right where she was now, smiling charmingly as she slid the necklace across the counter. He then held up a photocopy of her driver's license. "Jessica Miller," the sergeant said, his voice calm and authoritative. "We have you on camera selling this item, which has been reported stolen. We also have a signed declaration from you stating you were the legal owner. That's fraud." The color drained completely from my mother's face. My father stared at the evidence, his mouth slightly agape, the stern mask of his self-righteousness crumbling to reveal shock and disbelief. He looked at Jessica, truly looked at her, as if for the first time. "Jess," he whispered, his voice cracking, "is this true?" Jessica finally looked up, her eyes darting between her parents and the police officers. The smugness was gone, replaced by pure, cornered panic. Her usual weapon, tears, made an appearance. "No, it's a mistake," she stammered, her voice rising in hysteria. "Amanda is setting me up. She's always been jealous of me. She probably sold it herself and is trying to blame me to get me in trouble." It was a desperate, pathetic final volley, but this time, her audience wasn't buying it. Her tears had no power here, in this room full of evidence and consequence. "Ma'am," Sergeant Miller said, his voice firm, cutting through her hysterics. "We have you on camera, we have your signature, we have your ID. Lying to a police officer is not going to help your situation." He turned to me. "Ms. Miller, you confirmed you wish to press charges for felony theft and fraud." I looked past him, directly at my parents. I looked at their shattered faces as the truth they had refused to see was laid bare before them in the harsh, fluorescent light of a pawn shop. They had chosen their narrative. Now they had to live with the reality. "Yes, Sergeant," I said, my voice ringing with unshakable clarity. "I do." The immediate aftermath in the pawn shop was chaotic. Jessica's fabricated tears turned into genuine, panicked sobs as the officers formally detained her, reading her rights. My mother, Linda, seemed to collapse in on herself, whispering, No, this can't be happening." My father, Robert, just stood there, speechless, his face a mask of gray shock. The man who always had an answer, who always had control, was utterly lost. He finally turned to me, his eyes pleading. "Amanda, please don't do this. She's your sister. We can handle this as a family. She'll pay you back. We'll pay you back." "Handle it as a family?" I repeated, my voice devoid of the emotion I thought I would feel. There was no anger left, just a profound, empty disappointment. I tried to handle this as a family. I came to you with the truth, and you called me a liar. You called me jealous. You threw me out of your house. This, I said, gesturing to the scene around us, is what happens when handling it as a family fails. This is a matter for the law now. My mother found her voice, and it was laced with the venom of a cornered animal. How can you be so cruel? After all we've done for you, you would send your own sister to jail over a stupid piece of jewelry. First, I said, my voice dropping to a low, intense register, you have done nothing for me. I built my life on my own while you funded hers. And second, it was never about the jewelry. It was about the betrayal. It was about the lies. And it was about the fact that when I came to you for help, you chose to protect a thief instead of your daughter. I picked up the locket from the counter, its gold cool against my skin. I'm done. I walked out of the pawn shop without a backward glance, leaving them to deal with the wreckage they had created. The officers took my final statement outside, and I thanked them for their professionalism. Driving away, I didn't feel triumph or joy. I felt a quiet, somber sense of release, like a patient who has just undergone a painful but necessary surgery to remove something that was poisoning them from the inside. The following weeks were a blur of legal proceedings and deafening silence. Jessica was charged with felony theft. My parents hired her a top-tier lawyer, of course. They drained their savings to post her bail. I received a few frantic voicemails, first from my dad, begging me to reconsider, then from my mom, accusing me of destroying the family. I didn't listen to them fully. I deleted them and blocked their numbers. There was nothing left to say. The one call I did make was to my Grandma Rose. It was the hardest conversation of all. I told her everything, my voice shaking as I recounted the theft, the confrontation, and the legal consequences. I was afraid she would be disappointed in me for causing such a rift. Instead, her voice was full of a fierce, unwavering strength. You did the right thing, Amanda, she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. That necklace is a symbol of our family's integrity and strength. Jessica dishonored that. And your parents, well, love is supposed to make you a better person, not a blinder one. I am proud of you for standing up for yourself and for the truth. Her validation was the balm my wounded soul needed. She told me that a legacy isn't just something you inherit, it's something you build. Jessica's lawyer managed to get her a plea deal. Because it was a first offense, she avoided jail time, but she was sentenced to 2 years of probation, mandatory counseling, community service, and was ordered to pay me full restitution for the emotional distress and the cost of the tracker. The money, when it eventually came in court-ordered installments, felt meaningless. The real price had already been paid by all of us. My old family is gone. We don't speak. I see pictures of them on social media sometimes, forced smiles at holidays I'm no longer invited to. It hurts, but it's a clean pain now, like the ache of a healed bone, a reminder of the break rather than the break itself. My life has become quieter but more authentic. I've poured my energy into my work, taking on new and exciting projects. I've reconnected with old friends and made new ones, building a chosen family based on mutual respect and trust. My circle is smaller, but it is infinitely stronger. The locket sits in its box now in a safe. I don't wear it yet. The memories are still too raw. But sometimes I take it out and hold it. It's no longer just a symbol of the women who came before me. It's a symbol of the woman I was forced to become, one who learned to distinguish between the family you are born into and the family you create, between the love you are given and the respect you must demand for yourself. My grandmother was right. A legacy isn't just about what is passed down to you. It's about what you have the courage to build from the pieces left behind. And from the ruins of my old life, I am forging a new one, piece by piece, on a foundation of my own making.